Welcome to Viewpoints, brought to you by Equiture, the leading provider of public safety software and training. My name is Sherry Bartram, and I will be your host today. A little bit about us before we get started. We are an international leader in public safety training and technology, with products geared toward providing tools to help responders stay safe and educated. For those of you who are new, we offer monthly podcasts with a variety of guests geared toward public safety topics, as well as monthly webinars and a diverse offering of training courses. Joining us today is Gunnery Sgt. Matthew Betcher. Gunny Betcher, or Matthew, as I will refer to him, grew up in Colorado with parents in law enforcement and joined the U.S. Marines as a 19-year-old. He is trained as air traffic control. However, throughout his military career, he has achieved a variety of accomplishments, including a certified control tower operator, honor graduate as a certified Marine Corps martial arts instructor, air traffic control mobile team member and instructor, certified air traffic control Marine occupational specialty instructor, designated senior air traffic controller. He served as a staff non-commissioned officer in charge of the Marine Corps Air Station at Cherry Point, and he is designated Marine Mobile Team Leader for the 24th Marine Expeditionary Unit. Matthew, thank you for joining us today. You are our first active military guest, and we want to thank you for your service to our country. It is an honor to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Today we're going to talk about a variety of topics with Matthew. Many of our listeners come from public safety families. Many others do not, but are raising children and may be wondering if your career will impact them. Matthew, along with others, was part of our Raising a Family in Public Safety Kids Point of View back in September of 2023. But we thought we wanted to go a little bit deeper into this subject and also talk to him about life in the military and some compare and contrast with local public safety. So, Matthew, first I want to ask you, you have a lot of accomplishments from your time in Marine service. Is it common to have that many different accomplishments, or could you be qualified as an overachiever?
Well, I'm probably the absolute best person to talk to you about that subject, about how awesome I am. But um, no, I think that I expertise and I did what they call a subject matter expert in a very specific field of doing my job in a more like expeditionary, like deployed environment. There's others in my community that have done a lot more when it comes to different pathways. You know, there's small pathways that I can take all in the same community. The things that I've done in my career have been more so oriented towards going out and doing stuff in the middle of a field or a desert or the ocean or wherever they send me. While others have done a lot better with sitting and in stationary environments. So the things I've done. I think for me and the path that I wanted to take, I tried to become the one of the leading guys to do it. And I got up there, I think, but I don't know if I'm exceptionally qualified. I don't want to toot my horn too much. So,
Well,
but
I stumbled a little bit when I was reading that you're a designated senior air traffic controller. You don't look old enough to be considered a senior air traffic controller. What does it take to be a senior air traffic controller?
so that has to do with the amount of qualifications I've gotten around wherever I've been to. So once I have qualifications up in both the air traffic control tower and also down in like a radar room, it makes me become a senior air traffic controller along with my rank. So as a gunnery sergeant. I have upstairs and I have downstairs, and that kind of accumulates me to be able to have expertise both in both environments in my job. And that once I have that, it gives me that designation as a senior air traffic controller. I'll tell you what, don't tell my knees that, that I don't look senior, because, sometimes the, the body doesn't always feel as young. So the qualification of senior air traffic controller, with sometimes with the body, it matches up. Maybe not with the looks all the time though. So
I get that. Um, and so I do have one more question I want to ask you about your job specific right now. Um, when I first started my career in 911, I worked with a guy who had been in 911 for, I think at that point, he'd been dispatching for 6 or 7 years. I mean, it was actually before 911 was even 911, but he'd been dispatching law enforcement for several years, and he left that field and went into air traffic control. So um, now you've been doing air traffic control for several years, and you grew up in a law enforcement family with a dad in law enforcement and a mom in 911. What do you think the similarities are between what you do and what your mom did?
well, it's controlling chaos, I think, is a good term for it, right? So um I get pilots that are flying around in complete darkness, and as much as they're experienced, and but they're still looking for our help to make sure that they get to where they're supposed to be going, and they can't see anything. I think the correlation is kind of crazy because my mom, when she was taking calls, well, trying to guide that person out of darkness from, being in a situation where, somebody's hurt or they're scared, right? So it's it's a little bit different, but I think like the calm, collective nature that I have to have when I tell a pilot, hey, you can go down, you can turn left. I have to be sure about it just as much as, when, you know, my mom was on the phone with somebody that needed something, she couldn't also be as scared, or feeling, kind of freaked out just like that person is. That calm voice on the other line, I think, is a really important part of both jobs. So I've seen that, I've noticed that a lot when it comes to what I do and what my mom did. You have to be calm and cool under pressure for sure.
Okay, well, that kind of leads us into our next question. Can you tell us how you think life with parents in public safety may have directed you toward the military?
Well, I mean, if you ask my 19-year-old self, they didn't do anything, you know? You know, it was my choice. They had nothing to do with it. But growing up, it makes you kind of realize, and seeing other people that joined and why they joined, and um I think that it really did dictate my choices and how well I adapted to it. It might have been not so much like the forethought of like I am going to join because my family or my mom or my dad, but I think that how I stayed in, and the things that I came naturally to in the military, was the direct correlation with how my parents raised me and what they did, as their careers, and how it kind of changed our family dynamic, and the the morals and the stuff that was ingrained in me as a kid to make me who I am only made it easier for the military life to kind of like, well, this isn't too crazy. Oh, structure, I know that, So yeah, it was a nice it was a nice easy adjustment, and I think that had to do with mostly with my family life being in the public service for sure.
Well, and that's funny. And so, I'm going to do a little spoiler here because we had planned not to tell our audience until the end. But Matthew is my son. I have to tell this story because what he was talking about growing up, wanting structure and all, this is so funny. His 19-year-old self came to us after his first year in, or his first semester in college, and his 19-year-old self announced to us that he was tired of people telling him what to do, and he was joining the Marines. And his dad and I just looked at him and laughed and said, "Okay, son, you go do that." Um, and so to for our audience who is out there raising kids and wondering, wow, is this, what is going to happen with our kids? Is this making a difference? Is our careers even impacting them? Or you may not be thinking that at all. Uh, it does. It does impact them. You're just not going to see it for a while. Would you say
Yeah,
that's accurate?
the whole not getting told what to do thing, it's really not working out for me. I mean, I'm almost at, 15 years and every day I get told what to do. It's really weird. Uh, but yeah, yeah, it's pretty accurate because I think that if you ask any teenager, they're going to be like, no, my parents don't know anything. They haven't taught me anything. I actually know everything from the internet, or Facebook or whatever. Um, and I was there too. And I think that as you get older, you start to realize and it comes through. It really does. And I mean, my kid's still too young, so, uh, I don't know how that will make me feel as like as a parent. But I could only imagine for you and for dad, really questioning like, man, this one's going to be a weird one, like he doesn't want to be told what to do, so he's joining the military. Is anything that we've done, raising him and how our, you know, jobs have affected him? I don't know. I know it did, but it probably wasn't very easy to see, that's for sure.
Right.
So.
So, growing up, what kind of fun things do you remember having that other kids didn't have because of where your parents worked?
Fun things. Um, I got to do a lot of fun stuff. If that's what you mean, we got to be the casualties sometimes, in like for the fire department and when they were like doing training. Um, And as a kid, nobody does that, but me. I'm dramatic, so I'm like pretending to be dead. Nobody's even in the room. I'm not even supposed to be injured that way, but I was like, this could make the training so much better for these firefighters if I'm like laying on the ground, sprawled out. And it was like the best thing I've ever done is pretend to be severely injured, for my weekend. So, if I tried to explain that to somebody that wasn't in that type of, family or the, background, they'd be like, what do you mean? I played soccer or whatever. I was like, no, I pretended to have a compound fracture in my left leg, and they're like, oh, calm down. But no, stuff like that. And then obviously with dad being in, um, the police force side of stuff, the shooting is a big one too that people don't, even talking to guys in the military that now we spend a lot of time around firearms. They joined and they're like, I never touched one. I was like, all the time, like even when I was young, all the time. So, uh, and I considered that fun too, for sure, going out to the range with dad and shooting guns. So
Yeah, I mean, unless you grow up in a family that hunts, um, and that would be a different perspective of going up hunting. You'd go out with different guns. I know when we took you and your siblings to the range, we took you with a variety of different guns. So that was a family event. Going back to school on Monday. Hey, what'd you do? Hey, we went and shot 400 rounds. A little bit different. Um, so now, as a father yourself, does your son get to do things that non-military kids don't do that are any similar to your experiences? Or is the military so different than public safety that you don't really get to do things like that?
There's a lot of similarities with the kid, and I think that um, he sees the same type of structure I see for the from based off of when I was growing up in a public safety house versus a military house. I think there's a lot of same, kind of ideologies or, ways that you run the house, kind of, I guess. Um, and there's stuff like, the guns in the household and that's a little bit more commonplace for sure. There's a lot of differences though, that unfortunately my son has to experience more than I ever did. I leave a lot. I go places a lot. Um, I was in California for about 3.5 years, and I think I was only back in my house with my family for about 10 months of those 3 years, total cumulatively over those 3 years. I never had to experience my mom and dad leaving like that. You never left. You were at every game, and you always made it a point to be able to be there. And you had that kind of that capability. I've missed birthdays, I've missed anniversaries, I've missed Christmases, and nothing can really compare to that when it comes to any other job, almost, right? And I get people travel for their job, but they travel for a couple weeks or whatever. I mean, I've been gone for 9 months consecutively, multiple times now. So it's hard to compare with certain stuff that he's experiencing in a military household than it is a public safety for sure.
Right? It's a completely different level of service that you give in the military than what our local law enforcement does. So you've met a lot of people on your journey through your military career. What do you think has shocked you the most with the people? With some of the people you've met. I mean, obviously, you're gonna have to not give personal details, but what kind of stories? I mean, people love listening to stories, and you've always been a pretty good storyteller. So, what kind of things shock you the most?
Um, there's quite a few people that I've met that, when they tell me their background, and they're like, hey, like, oh, well, what was your family life like? And I kind of tell them mine. Um, some of the most shocking ones is the amount of people that I've been able to talk to and meet that have um, not as structured home life when they're growing up. It's and it's shocking mostly because I remember I was in boot camp and I was like, hey, so yeah, like, typically, we did our summer vacation and my third cruise was pretty crazy, and what did you guys do for your guys' summer vacations? And, like just completely oblivious, and it shocked me. They're like, you said 3 cruises? And I'm like, yeah, that's standard, standard stuff. We didn't, go to lunches sometimes to save up for our cruise or whatever, like I was completely blown away that some people have said, well, this is the first time I've left my state. Um, and then it was like, well, this is the I didn't have a mom and a dad growing up. That was something that was uh I guess I knew, but it was always crazy to hear the differences in what I experienced, being, I think, somewhat sheltered from the fact that there's people that don't have the same lifestyle that I do and how different it was. Um, hearing about people moving quite a bit is another shocking one. You know, I didn't move very much until I joined the military one time. You know, and there's been people that I've met that their their parents were already in the military or they were in a different job that had them moving around quite a bit. And it always shocked me to hear about their stories joining, you know, four different high schools and having that constant rotation of friends. And I was like, it was almost too much, you know, to kind of hear. But there's a lot of crazy stories that obviously maybe wouldn't be great for a podcast. But there's been some shocking stuff for sure with all the people that I've met. So
So, when you were growing up in public safety, um, you heard a lot of stories, in from us in our work. Then they were always scrubbed so that you didn't get the personal details. But some of them were funny stories, and some of them weren't. Uh, what kind of stories? I mean, other than the people that you've met, what kind of stories can you share with us on your adventures? So, you've been deployed twice,
mm,
and you've been literally, literally coast to
literally.
coast. Um,
Mhm.
what kind of stories can you share with us that are, just crazy funny? So, military personnel and public safety, I think, probably share similar senses of humor. So, um, just keep that in mind as you're telling your story.
Man, there's a lot of them. Uh, maybe, I mean, maybe for a different podcast, some of them for more military humor jokes. But uh, I was, uh, I guess it's kind of it kind of puts things into perspective, and I think that some police officers might experience it too. I was in Afghanistan, and you have um, like quick reaction drills to if you know you start getting shot at or if like rocket fire comes in, you have to lay down, um, especially with rocket fire you have to lay down. Well, there's these huge like type of bugs, spiders, you know, they're called camel spiders. They're in the States too, apparently, but they're huge. And when you're laying down, if you lay down near one of them, like one of its home, it crawls on you. And I had a buddy and me laying down because there was some, you know, supposed rocket fire coming towards our base, and a camel spider crawled on him and he just got up, you know, and he's like, you know what? If it's my time to go, I'll go with a rocket, not with a spider, you know. And you know, it's like it's a little bit, you know, but it's funny because we joke like that a lot, you know, like, hey, we'd rather just, you know, take one take one for the team and stay away from the camel spider rather than lay down on the ground with them. So uh, yeah, that was. It's funny because you know I think that you have to make a joke out of that sometimes, and because if you take it too seriously, it gets too hard. And I noticed that a lot with when I was growing up with with you know with you and Dad. Just you gotta make a joke out of it, or n- lighten it a little bit, or else it's going to just be too much and you know it's going to be a little bit overwhelming. So joking around about standing up and just getting hit with a rocket is pretty advanced, you know, but at some point, you know, well, what else are you going to do other than try and make light of the situation? So
So these spiders, do they bite? Were they
I
poisonous?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think that they're just gross looking. so so there's like they're just you just don't want them on you, you know, because they look weird. But that's about it. I don't think they're poisonous. So, which makes it even funnier that just because you don't want a creepy crawly on you, you like I'm getting up, I'm not dealing with it. So,
Huh. And so
yeah.
you said you were gone a lot when you were in California. Um, were you deployed out of California, or why were you gone so often?
Yeah, so I was deployed out of California. I went to Afghanistan and I came back and they almost immediately sent me right back out to Kuwait. Um, and I spent time in Kuwait up there too. So, um, and then I came back again, and that's when they wanted me to train. So they put me down in Yuma, Arizona for quite some time, twice. So to get more and more trained, some of those qualifications you listed, I got while I was there. Um, to do that mobile team instructor and student, I got down there, and that's just in the middle of the desert down in Yuma, trying to make light of sleeping with the scorpions and stuff down there because that's where you just sleep out in the open, like no tent. They're just like, hey, just deal with it. So, um, um, they said that's what made you a good team player is if you didn't have a tent and you slept with the scorpions. So
Oh,
I don't know if that's real or not, but it sounded pretty cool while we were there, as long as you didn't get bit by one. So
right. And most local law enforcement doesn't have to go through that.
no, it's definitely different, but I don't think that the correlation is too far fetched to be able to really, have them stand side by side. I don't experience, traffic stops, every day. I don't experience the call volumes that 911 operators do. I do experience quite a bit of, air traffic, tons of planes in the sky. I've been talking to them, but I get guys that are calling me up and experienced and aren't kind of scared for their lives. It's a normal day. I want to land here. You can land. Um, so there's stuff that for me, there might be more busyness and more kind of weird stuff that comes along with the job, but I don't have to experience calls. You know, I, I think that there would be a lot of guys that I've worked with as air traffic controller that it's a high stress job and you talk to them and they say, "Oh, I'm not stressed out," and they might be true. I think that they would absolutely get stressed out if they joined a 911 operator dispatch center and try to take those calls, um, because they're just not the same. It's not the same mentality, and I think that there's definitely different struggles, back and forth for sure.
So I know you're air traffic control with the military. How does that, I mean, if you know any air traffic controllers, that work not for the military, do you know what the difference is? Because I've always heard that it's a really high stress job. So I've wondered how high stress is that as compared to, what a busy dispatcher does, which is also high stress.
Yeah, so the same thing I'm doing is what some people do out the same air traffic controllers do for the FAA. The difference is that they have a ginormous workload. Um, and I think that it becomes very high stress in that environment because they're talking to, I mean, 2,000 aircraft a day in a 6 hour window. Um, some of them, and I have friends that have, sat down to work. They get their briefing and they don't stop talking for 6 hours. And that's not me being over the top. They are talking continuously for 6 hours and they get a break, to go eat. And then they get a break to go, relax for 5, 10 minutes. But if they're sitting down working, they're talking. Yeah, that's and then you say how many times have you stuttered or said the wrong thing or misspoke or you know instead of saying 1 2 you say 2 1 because you have a dyslexic moment or something. You can't have that. You say take a left and you mean a right. That's a problem. So the high stress of everything you say has to be perfect. It, that's where it
Well,
gets there.
right. I mean, if if we were to tell an officer to take a right on Main instead of a left, that they just would have to go around the block. You
Mm.
tell an aircraft to take a right, and they would run into another plane.
Yeah, that's not just circle around again, oopsie doopsie. Yeah,
Right.
there's yeah, yeah. And
Right.
granted, the a dispatcher telling somebody to go left instead of right is also there's still that stress because they got to get to a call, they got to help that person, and there's still that stress level. It's the same concept, and there's still lives on the line. So there's definitely a good correlation there to being able to say they're the same, but
Right.
it's weird because as dispatchers, you're sending to a problem. I'm talking and I'm hoping not for a problem. And the majority of the time there isn't because, you know, we hear about when there's problems because, planes crash, you know, or there's a serious issue. And luckily we don't have that type of call volume with bad stuff happening like dispatchers. And I say luckily because I don't know if I would want to do this job if I was getting a call every, 5, 10 minutes with a problem with an aircraft in the sky, 30,000 feet up. I think I would have said, I'm done. Yeah, for
Have you
sure.
have you had to work with very many or any plane crashes? Because I imagine that would be a pretty significant moment in a career.
I have, we had, we had actually a plane crash here at Cherry Point a year or so ago. Um, and no one was hurt. Pilot was okay, but the aircraft was, obviously was completely damaged. Um, and it's high stress for sure when that happens, but um, we train as best as we can um, with as much realism before the real thing happens. So that way, when it happens, we're just as we try and be calm and collected, get everybody out there to be able to help. So it's a high stress situation for sure because we don't want them to happen, and we have so many aircraft doing so many things all the time, and then that one time uh, that's that's kind of what you train for. Uh, and it's funny because as a 911 operator, you don't train for I'm going to get a call and they're going to just say thanks, like you don't train for that. I
Right.
we we train to take 100 calls from pilots and all of them be uh, a disaster, and almost none of them are. And it's kind of weird to have all that training for that one time that might not happen for years. Um, I was in Quantico for in Virginia, and for almost 5 years, and we didn't have a single major emergency with any aircraft. The worst thing that we had was a pilot said that his wheels seemed like they were really hot and they were smoking. We're like, okay, do you want us to cool them down with some water? And he said, yeah. And we're like, oh well, put that on the major accomplishments, helped the aircraft cool his tires down, So like, that's almost 5 years worth of work and never seen an actual, serious problem. And I'll take 5 years of not seeing a problem every day for sure.
Right. That's crazy, plan for the worst, hope for the best. It's
Mm.
and then you were part of those planning for the worst when you were a kid. Uh, the mock disasters, and so it's interesting to see now you're part of the planning that goes into the planning.
Hmm.
It's funny how that's come around.
Yeah.
Well, Matthew, I want to thank you for being with us today. Do you have anything you want to add for the audience as you're getting ready to depart for your third deployment?
Oh wow. Yeah, we'll keep it. I guess we'll keep it in the public, or like the military slash, public safety realm instead of me just going on a crazy tangent. 'Cause I could, uh, I think that for one, my host mom, amazing. Definitely need all the raises that you can get. But when it comes to uh, other people looking and watching, and if they're trying to take away anything, especially as when it comes to being a family member or being a mom or a dad, um, I think that it's going to be unappreciated for a long time. And if you just kind of stick the course for sure, and that's what you guys did with me, and you're going to see that kind of come full circle for what you do and the things that you do for your work have a lasting and I would say positive impact on the kids that you're raising. So if it comes down to it, just don't falter in thinking that it's not going to work, or what you're doing isn't right, because it is. And when they grow up and they get older, I don't know how many times I've told you, Mom, like how appreciative I am of everything that you and Dad did to kind of steer me on that right path. And I think that it's something that is hard to see when you're there, trying to raise a 17-year-old brat. But it comes around. So for the parents that are kind of raising kids, I think that for me too, as a dad to a 12-year-old, you got to stay the course and hope and know that the things that you're doing in your life for your job and how you're kind of bringing that home, they play out the right way when your kid grows up, for the most part. So
Thank you. So I just want to help the audience out here. Matthew was a challenging child. He was a even more challenging teenager. And I can say that because I have his permission to say this. We've talked about it multiple times. Um, and so for those of you who may be having that teenager that's just a challenge, hang in there. When he was a senior in high school, he's like, whoosh. And we said, okay, don't break the rules. Don't get arrested. Get A's and B's and we'll buy you a motorcycle. We never, ever thought that he would do that. And he did. So
oh
we,
yeah.
we had to go buy him a motorcycle. Um, so I would just say stay the course. We did not hear any gratitude out of him though, ever, until he um, finished boot camp and we went down for his graduation. And in boot camp in the Marines, they do a thing called the crucible. Is that right? Am I saying that
Yep,
right, Matthew?
that's right. Yep.
Yeah. And he said, we went to graduation and we didn't get to talk to him beforehand and it got all done. And he came up to me and he said, Mom, I didn't think I was going to make it through the crucible. It's pretty intense, last 3 days. And he said, I didn't think I was going to make it, but then I remembered everything that you and Dad taught me.
Yep. Yeah. And, that was 3 days of almost no sleep. Um, and, getting thrown in the mud. And I actually, I put my pack down on a fire ant hill
Oh,
when
yeah.
we were getting ready to do a 15-mile hike back. And then I was sitting on my pack, and then they said, load everything up. You're walking 15 miles. And right when I put my pack on, I got swarmed. They're biting my head, they're biting my face, and I was told, don't you drop your pack. You keep walking. And um, yeah, there was nothing that could have prepared me for that, but there's no way that I couldn't have made it through without what you guys kind of taught me to kind of persevere and push through. And there I would have stopped. I think I would have stopped if I would have been raised less because I had been bit by the time I was done. I had been bit probably over 300 times um, on my face and on my head and my neck. It was brutal, but it was kind of funny because it all went away right when I became a Marine, and that end of the hike, that's what happens. So you're a recruit until the end of that hike, and that hike was probably the hardest moment up to that point in my life that I've ever experienced, and for sure, yeah, you and Dad definitely got me through that. Um, but then right when I got my Eagle Globe and Anchor and I became a Marine, that was getting me through that. You know, the newfound designation as an actual Marine. Those bites didn't hurt no more. So yeah, because you can't let them hurt. You know, you're a Marine
Right.
now. Oh, I don't feel
Yeah.
pain. Right?
Yeah. I'm tough.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so for you parents, just hang in there. Just keep doing what you're doing because it does pay off. So, for our audience, this podcast, we're recording it right before Matthew deploys for his third deployment, like I said. So we want to wish you a safe deployment and a safe return.
Oh, thank
And
you.
we're grateful for
I
your
should be okay.
service. We're grateful for your service, Matthew, and I'm proud of you.
Thanks, Mom.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we wish you a great day and be safe.